as start the recording of this webinar. So today we'll be discussing a little bit about Impilo, what we do and what makes our business so exciting and innovative in the virtual care and RPM space. We'll go into a little introduction into myself, some of my colleagues, and our special guest speaker today. And then we'll kick it off with a fireside chat with our two special guests, as well as followed up by a Q&A session. So we would love to have your participation. Feel free to drop questions in the chat throughout the webinar. If anything comes top of mind, we'll make sure to note those down and answer all that we can at the end of the session. If we're not able to answer them and it is a prominent question, just note it in the chat and I'll make sure to follow up with you via email or have one of my colleagues follow up. Okay, so a little bit about Impilo, just at a high level. We're enabling virtual care organizations to bring remote patient monitoring into the home. It's something that is so excited and we'd love to chat with you about it. We have three high-level topics on the screen that we're going to be touching today. Obviously, in the space of RPM, you have the problem of how am I going to get these devices to my patients? Luckily, Impilo has a solution with our third-party logistics solutions, providing everything from device procurement all the way down to technical support. So when there's a will, there's a way, and we'd love to help your business really revolutionize how you are managing your logistics at the current time, and then identify any areas of opportunity that we could certainly help you fix. So I'm sure that Pat will talk more about it in the webinar, but just at a high level, this is what we do to support third-party logistics. So today, my name is Haley Minter. I am the marketing and demand generation lead here at Impilo. So all things marketing. If you are also a marketing guru, I would love to connect. I will drop my LinkedIn in the chat. Feel free to reach out. Would love to talk to you about what you're doing. And today I have the lovely Courtney with me moderating our chat. She is an account manager here at Impilo and also manages the account that we are featuring today, which is Marley Medical. So Courtney, if you would like to say something.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be a part of the webinar today. I'm really looking forward to some of the topics we'll be discussing and can't wait to dive in. Thanks.
Great. So today we have two fantastic special guests, but firstly would love to introduce Pat Quire. He is our former Vice President of Supply Chain here at Impilo and now our Chief Operating Officer. He is a Penn State alum, so go State. He majored in economics and theater, so he has a very robust background. And he previously worked at Five Below as well as GoPuff, so two very reputable companies helping out in their supply chain and merchandising. Last but not least, we have our special guest and panelist today, the Chief Operating Officer and co-founder of Marley Medical. So David also goes as Hugh Banks. I'll kick it off to you to give a little bit about yourself and why you're so excited to join us today.
Hey, thanks a lot, Haley. Yeah, nice to meet you all. Yeah, happy to be here today to talk about our journey with Impilo and how they've really been helpful for us for our business. So looking forward to the discussion.
Fantastic. Okay, I will kick it off to Courtney, who will start our fireside chat on all things logistics management.
Thanks, Haley. First, I wanted to start off with you, Hugh Banks, just a general question about Marley Medical, what you all do there, and just explain a little bit about your partnership with Impilo and how it fits into your overall work.
Sounds great. I'll talk a little bit maybe about the problem space to begin with. I think it helps to frame where we fit in the overall picture. The space that we treat patients in is in chronic disease, and specifically we work in the cardiometabolic space. So this would be things like hypertension, diabetes, lipids or cholesterol issues, as well as obesity. And in this space and in many chronic diseases, I think we know a lot about how the care should be delivered, what the guidelines say, about care. If it's executed correctly, we know that we can help patients be much healthier and live longer lives. Unfortunately, the way the structure of the system is currently doesn't really work very well for people with chronic disease. So like in our space, you could say up to 75% of people are actually not controlled. I mean, just pretty dismal result and on very serious diseases. And this stems from a couple of different reasons. First, there's a paper that was published recently by Dr. Porter and his colleagues at the University of Chicago. And I think they really put a pin in part of the issue, which is that primary care is largely tasked with managing these patients, in their early stages and mid stages. But if you actually look at the guidelines and what kind of care would need to be delivered for these patients, on a typical panel of patients for a primary care physician, they would need to work about 26 to 27 hours per day to be able to actually do the things that they're supposed to do to care for these patients. I don't know about you, but I think that's a tall order, and obviously not super sustainable from any kind of a work-life balance as much as finding that many hours in the day. So that's part of the issue. The second issue is that historically primary care has been built around the idea of fee for service, right? I broke my arm, go in, I get treated for my broken arm, and I get sent on my way. And so it's very kind of more on the like transactional basis and less on kind of a continuous care basis. And now that's changing. And certainly there are new models of healthcare payments where it's looking more on outcomes and longer term care and things like that. But just historically, we've got those two problems, like overcapacity and well as like the structure itself just doesn't lend itself very well to this. So you end up with people kind of treating the acute issues, and then the long-term stuff sort of just gets worse over time. And that's what we see in the data about, with all these people that are not well controlled. I'll get to what Marley does in a second, I promise. But anyway, that's kind of, I think the setup there is really important. What we set out to do was based largely on some experience we had at a company called Propeller Health, where we built remote patient monitoring devices. And we found that if you deliver these to patients in the right way, help them understand what they need, but also make it as invisible as possible so they don't have to do extra work to be able to communicate their results with their care team, you can have exceptional outcomes. You can prevent hospitalizations because you can see the trends that are happening and intervene well in advance of that kind of terrible situation. And so we purpose-built a clinic that's based around remote patient monitoring. Like, we know this is the right way to treat patients, and we think by starting over and looking at this as kind of a whiteboard, start from scratch clinic built around remote patient monitoring, that we can purpose-build this clinic to be able to be successful in this space. And in order to do that, we need to figure out a way to fit within the continuum of care here. We know primary care has very good purpose overall, and we know that specialty care also works in the cases they need to work for. And we think that by kind of helping to fit in between those two important spaces of care delivery, that we can do a great job of helping to manage these folks in a new clinic model that can help them get to goal. So anyway, that's what we're doing at Marley Med, is really taking those learnings from the past and then applying them now to this new clinic model.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, David. And would there be any changes that you would have made from the beginning, or anything you'd like to change moving forward when starting a new company?
Well, I mean, I think obviously we're here talking about Impilo, and I think yeah, I can gush here about what I wouldn't change, I guess, as a starting point. So at Propeller, I mentioned before, we were more of a device company, and we were selling into clinics, and so we also had our own logistics arm and things like that, and I actually ran it, and I think it is a very, very important piece of the puzzle. I mean, getting devices to patients at the right moment, when they're ready for them, in the right frame of mind, and they know what to do with them, and the tools set up and things like that, so you can invisibly connect to them, is super important. A clinic is not really great at that, or shouldn't necessarily need to be great at that, I think. And so, in the past, having to manage inventory and logistics and FDA inspections and all that kind of stuff that comes with like the important work of handling medical devices is a huge chore. And for a small company, it can be really, really difficult. There's just staffing issues, right? Like finding folks that are really good at that important work, able to execute it well, and always looking for continuous improvement on how to get best inventory levels and getting shipments out on time and things like that, is something that I am so happy that we didn't have to do again here at Marley. We opened the clinic about a year and a half ago. We're now just over 1,200 patients, and we've been able to grow through that whole period of time without even thinking about logistics, right? And I mean, we love you, we think about you, but we don't have to worry about it. And I think that's a really important thing for us because we can focus on the business because there's a lot of hard things in doing new things in healthcare. And it's so great to be able to not have to worry about this piece of the puzzle. And so I think I'm kind of doing the politician thing, or I'm answering the question I want to answer. But I think that's just an important lesson for me, and just a wonderful situation here to be able to have this area managed by somebody else who's really good at it, so then we can focus on the new stuff and the stuff that is really going to build an exceptional patient experience and great clinical outcomes for our patients.
Thank you so much. The next question I have is for Pat, and just wanted to ask about some of the key challenges with healthcare providers and what they face when managing logistics, some of the issues for remote patient monitoring programs.
Appreciate it, Courtney. And I think QBanks did a great job of already teeing some of that up. I think the issues were the learnings from one company to the next, right? I don't think many people have time to be managing the day-to-day inventory logistics associated with keeping these programs moving. I think their time and attention needs to be focused on the patient, primarily, number one, not necessarily how to get a device there, how to get it hooked up, how to get the readings, how to actually monitor those readings and keep that all maintained, right? I think that those pieces, clearly, QBanks did it before, but I think having that pushed off to another team is probably the most appropriate. So I think the three key areas is obviously the distribution of the devices, getting those devices connected so they're actually transmitting, but then ultimately keeping patients engaged, right? If the patients aren't using the devices that are actually there, then the whole program falls apart, right? So I think devices are integral, getting them standard logistics, right place, right time, right product, right? Get that to the patient when they need it. And then from there, ensure that they're actually connected and we're getting those readings. And if we're doing that, then I think that the other part can actually be focused on by our clients and healthcare providers.
Awesome. Thank you, Pat. And just kind of following up, David, with that same kind of a line of questioning, how has the partnership with Impilo impacted the efficiency and effectiveness of your team?
Yeah, I mean, kind of what I said before about like, it just worked, and I think that's the beautiful part of it is that it is, it was so integral to our ability to grow. It's so integral too, as we expanded our clinic, to be able to do that easily. We started out with hypertension, expanded into obesity, and now are doing type 2 diabetes. And in each case, those are new devices. And all we had to do was say, hey, add these new devices to our list. And we were able to go off. And of course, we had to figure out the other stuff that comes with the care of those patients, but we didn't have to figure out the device side too. And with our tech backend and your platform, then we just need to be able to pull that new data. So we don't need to worry about which manufacturer and what their API is like and all that other kind of tech work that goes along with adding new devices normally to a platform. That's not us anymore. And I think that's a really big victory for us because, we have a small engineering team and we really want them focused on creating new value and features for either the clinicians to be able to practice better or for the patients to be able to understand their disease better and take action. And so I think as a small company, it's just more time that we can spend on that patient facing side. So really there, it's just hard to overstate it, but I think it's really been great for us to be able to be that flexible and to be able to just go and execute our plan and be able to have a partner like Impilo to be able to help us do that.
Thank you so much. And Pat, how do you feel healthcare providers collaborate with logistics partners and technology vendors to enhance their RPM programs?
Great follow-up. I think one, I got to say thank you for suggesting it just works because it certainly has a lot going on under the covers. And if that's the external view of that, I think that's great. And the big point is really this, how we're working with you. I think, again, this device procurement and being able to actually standardize that process, ensuring that we are remaining relatively agnostic to the device brand, but ultimately being able to get the right device to the patient for the need, right? So a lot of devices doing the same treatment, the same type of readings. There's certain ones that work for certain programs, right? So being able to also provide some of that guidance, some of that due diligence already of having tested this with multiple different providers, different patients, identify really what the right path forward for a device would actually be, right? So I think giving a little bit of insight there on catalog and management, but then certainly being able to ensure that the patients are ready for that clinician to arrive, right? So if there's either arrive or engage with them in any capacity, and making sure that the patient actually is aware of the program, that they know why they're actually enrolled in this program, that they have a point of view on how to engage appropriately with the program. And that's another place that we can kind of interject and help streamline. So between device procurement, standardization, and standard support of the patient device, I think are some of the key integral areas that anybody would want to work with us.
Yeah, I'm going to go off and make sure that I note that I've not been paid to be on this show. So even though I am kind of gushing about how great you've been. But one thing I'll say too, just to like add on to what you said there, Pat, is that you've also been really good at taking feedback for the platform, right? So from our standpoint, like understanding those devices that are out in the field, and if we're not getting signals, why is that? Is it not connected? Is the battery running low? Are there other issues going on too? And I think being a partner in that regard too, to be interested in hearing that feedback and taking that into your own roadmap planning and things like that too, just to help to improve and bolster the data stream, which is obviously is everything, right? At the end of the day, in terms of why we're doing what we're doing, is to see that result coming through, to understand where people are at. And so I think your tech team's been really flexible in that regard too, and we appreciate that.
I think that's another part that was actually overlooked initially from my perspective, was how integral the battery life is of these devices when they're deployed, and actually being able to have insight to that and follow up with patients in real time to keep them connected, right? If they're losing sight or don't even know that their devices are connected anymore, we're not going to be transmitting, we're not going to be getting readings. So whole different area of monitoring and logistics that wasn't necessarily considered.
Yeah, totally.
Awesome. And Hugh Banks, any success stories or outcomes from working with Impilo that Marley Medical has been able to take away from working with us?
Yeah, it kind of builds on that last point too. We have some patients who live in rural areas or behind a large hill or whatever it is, and they just don't get good cell connectivity. It is improving dramatically. In the time I've been in this space, just seeing cell coverage levels in general across the country have just continued to improve, but there's still pockets where it just doesn't exist. And I think we were on such a good run and didn't have any issues. And then all of a sudden, we had a patient say, "Oh yeah, in order," because saw, I think, pockets of data, where a bunch came at once and we wouldn't hear from him for a couple of weeks. And he was like driving up on top of a hill with his to be able to send the data into us. And I think your team, it convinced us, and I was a little reluctant because Bluetooth is not my favorite technology when it comes to patient devices. But in this case, we've done that in a couple of rare cases where it just wasn't possible with cell connectivity to use an app and Bluetooth. And again, like we just asked for that kind of support. You said, "Hey, I think this is how we can solve it." You supported the patients in that setup and things like that, and allowed us to address that. And again, we didn't have to do anything more than just ask. And I think that is really a big success for us, is the flexibility there that having a partner like Impilo brings to this, is that we can switch devices and have your support team support us to be able to augment our small team. Has been really great. And I think that's like just the tip of the iceberg, but I think there's a lot of case studies like that where we just collaborated together and came up with a solution in a time of need.
Awesome. And then same question for you, Pat. Any success stories or real world examples that highlight the importance of logistics management in remote patient monitoring?
For sure. I think the one is the rural component. It's huge in this space right now, not necessarily, that's being able to do monitoring from home is not complete without being able to reach every home, right? So unless there's a path forward for that, and I think that's one of the critical areas that providers are relying on, is to be able to actually reach these destinations that may otherwise not have access to critical care when they actually need it. So I think, and that kind of leads to another example, which is actually getting these readings in real time, right? So if we can get these readings in real time, if we have consistent connectivity, we can monitor that, engage on that, and set alerts to keep people, clinicians, informed. So I think one of the real examples is that we have had readings that have exceeded alerts, and those have actually resulted in critical outreach, and that we actually were able to intervene and get service that was necessary in that time, which I think from all of us here at Impilo was very eye-opening, just to see that that actually take course live. So yeah, being connected in real time to patients, I think is one of the clear benefits of this whole entire program.
For sure.
Fantastic. And then, David, just another question here. How does Marley Medical just envision the future of their RPM program and the role that logistics management plays into that future?
Yeah, I mean, I think, in some ways it feels like the monitoring patients at home and providing this care to the home is really just getting started, even though it's been on the verge of the cusp for so long. I think finally the payers, Medicare have started to, see the value of this. They're reimbursing for it now. That didn't used to be the case, which I think was a struggle, because I think we clearly had all these pilot programs that up around the country. Ochsner, for instance, like is one of the early models, right, that showed all these great results, but it just took a long time for payment to catch up, and for the realization that this kind of care model, given the outcomes that we're seeing, is really good for this type of patient population. So I think just seeing the evolution of that is a part of all of this, right? In terms of what signals are really important and are worth it, right? I mean, it's still, there still has to be a cost associated with these programs, and then a benefit. And I think as we look towards the future, I think as we go towards more value-based care, we're able to make more of those calls on our own without having to, sort of line item every single signal towards what, which signals make the most sense, and things like that. And I think we can look at it at our own model and our own plan design around this kind of care delivery. And I think that allows us to think about the signals in a different way, in terms of like, what do we really need? And I think I expect that the device innovation will also be interesting to watch, right? Are there better ways to measure something like blood pressure that's a little more consistent? It's a really rough measure, and it moves all over the place. And like I saw a paper recently, I think it was AMA, and it was all the different ways that you could modulate your blood pressure. And one was active listening. It's like, yeah, even if your feet are on the floor and your arms in the right spot and things like that, if you're just listening to someone talking, it's going to move your blood pressure. And I guess it depends on who's talking. But anyway, I think that it'll be interesting to see, now that the payments are starting to align to this kind of a model, which it's just been a long time coming. I think it'll be interesting to see what kind of innovation comes in the space. And then I think it's helpful, because we're not able to keep our ear to the ground on that kind of stuff, that Impilo can do that for us. And I think outline, hey, we're seeing this new device type start to emerge, or other companies that are just figuring out how to make them much more cost effective to be able to help to deliver the care to more people, as the prices start to come down for some of these types of things. I think some of the cell connectivity is getting less and less expensive, because I mean, we're sending like text messages of data, it's not like video streams here. And so I think the leverage there to be able to negotiate with the cell carriers will be interesting to see too, as these things become cheaper. And then I think it becomes much more tenable for programs to think about rolling these types of things out. So I mean, that's us, but that's also others as well too. That I just think that there's a pretty big space opening up here in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all excited to see what comes out. Pat, same question. How does Impilo envision the future of their RPM programs and the role that logistics plays in that future?
Great. I think, yeah, I think cost in general is going to be something that is going to evolve and become a little bit more beneficial over time, right? I mean, the devices are going to Hugh Bank's point, is going to get better. We're going to get better readings. We're going to get more consistent readings. It's going to be cheaper to access those readings. The devices themselves will get cheaper. The path to the home is going to develop and probably get cheaper. So I think that as long as this can become a little bit more widespread, be adopted a little bit more largely, see the value in these programs, then I think they're going to become affordable, and I think we're going to be able to maintain this a little bit more consistently. So I think the path at home is going to be one of the primary places for healthcare going forward, hospital at home and everything else. So, but all that can only happen with scale. So I think as we start to develop these programs and bring on more patients from home, then all of this will start to streamline a little bit more effectively.
Agree.
And David, what advice would Marley Medical give to other healthcare providers considering Impilo as a logistics partner for RPM?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just have to ask yourself, do you really want to do this? And I think I just don't understand. You know what I mean? I think there's like a temptation there, like, oh, we can figure out how to ship a few boxes or whatever, and things like that. And sure, I think for a few small kind of cases, it's probably going to make sense or be appealing. But I think very quickly it becomes a massive headache and a massive time suck. And I think that is just something you can't really afford as you're trying to build this other thing that's also really complicated and really hard. And I think there's no real benefit of building this kind of thing yourself in the end, because I think it is just harder than it seems on the surface to be able to maintain. And I think if you want to expand your clinic, if you're thinking about trying new devices over time and things like that, there's just a lot of headache and work that comes with that kind of expansion. And I think you just need to think through that to figure out if it really makes sense for you to take that on yourself. If that's really the value of your business is somehow tied to that, then maybe. But if your value of your business is in patient outcomes or is in some other success area, it's going to be really hard to justify the time and energy in a space like this, especially if there's someone as capable as Impilo in delivering on this portion of the overall equation.
Well, Pat and David, thank you so much. Do you have any other last comments that you'd like to add before we move over to the Q&A portion?
All good.
Awesome. I'll pass it over to Haley. Thanks, everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you, Courtney. First of all, Courtney, thank you so much for moderating this session. It was wonderful just with your relationship to Marley on the account to have you moderate this chat. And of course, Pat and David, thank you so much for sharing your insights. I'm sure that they were very resourceful for our guests as well as the people that will view this after. But super excited to jump into our Q&A session today. So gonna wait a couple of minutes for people to drop things in the chat, but we can actually kick it off as we do have some questions. So if anything comes to mind while we're going through these, feel free to drop them in the chat and we can answer them live. So our first question goes to Pat from our guest Gio. He asked, what issues do you see when you ship devices directly to patients versus handing out direct from the provider?
I think the main piece there, regardless of where it's coming from, is ensuring that connection to the patient, technically, right? In some capacity, assigning devices to that patient, right? So when we're doing that from shipment outbound, we have a little bit more control over that. on site, and we can actually manage that a little bit more directly. When we push these devices out to sites and clinicians are handing them out directly, we just want to make sure that we're having the appropriate assignments so that we're getting the right readings back and that they're actually aligned to the right patients. That can cause a massive issue and headache if that is not the outcome. So I think it's really just establishing that that connection between both patient and device is probably the most integral piece of both processes.
Great. Thank you so much, Pat. Moving forward to some more questions, we have a question coming in from Jake. He asked another question for Pat. What are some of the key ways that Impilo measures the success of our RPM logistics management? What would those KPIs be that we focus on?
So for us, I mean, we have a pretty good internal slogan of trying to get to zero at the end of the day. So there really can't be anything left open, whether that be a patient-specific ticket, an open question with a client, or an order outbound, right? So establishing solid SLAs, making sure that we're actually adhering to those timelines, and then managing those exceptions. So anything that's not getting us completed needs to be a concern. But ultimately, need to get the engaged readings from a patient. So if that's not what we're managing, then the rest of it is kind of futile. So ensure that we're getting integral, transparent readings from patients on a consistent basis, and then the rest of it is to support that.
Great. It's always awesome to have some KPIs, just to have some metrics of what to hit. And I'm sure that could be super helpful for some of our guests as well. Last but not least, Hubanks, we have a final question for you. This is Impilo specific, and this anonymous attendee would like to know what made you choose Impilo in the first place, and what keeps you coming back? What is that relationship rapport that really keeps Marley Medical in our network?
Yeah, I mean, I think, throughout, I've tried to give some examples of that. I think in the big picture side, I think we really stumbled on Impilo. There was a connection made, and I can't remember exactly how your CEO and our CEO know each other from some past life, but I think that was kind of how we got introduced or reintroduced. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, I'm in. I think that I knew from the past that I didn't want to recreate that. That whole logistics device side, if we could avoid it, and the fact that we could use Impilo to help us launch was really a no-brainer for me, just kind of coming out of my experience. And I think the other second part was what continues, or why we continue. And I think it's we have a really good partnership. I think Courtney is amazing, really helps to chase down all the issues that we have and things like that. And meet on quarterly business reviews to kind of talk big picture. I think that's really important to do with a good partner, to be able to get out of the weeds now and then and think about the big picture. We really like that. And I think just responsiveness, there's always going to be hiccups and things like that happen, and you're all over it when it does, and we figure it out. We, look at how to prevent it in the future, and those are all great kind of learning org type of skills that you bring. And so I think that also is a big piece that keeps us, happy and happy to continue.
Great. We obviously love to hear that you're happy, and we hope that other people on this call are able to take some of the context of this conversation and use it to make decisions that might implement 3PL solutions into their practices. So I think that pretty much wraps it up for today. Thank you so much to our panelists, Pat and David, for joining us. Again, David is from Marley Medical. We encourage you to check out all that they are doing on their website, as well as their LinkedIn channels. Courtney, thank you so much for moderating. You were lovely as always. And as always, Impilo would love to connect with you, as well as I would like to connect with you. So feel free to check us out online at impilo.health, as well as LinkedIn, same company name. And feel free to connect with us further by checking out our blog posts. We have blogs going out every week, filled with a bunch of knowledge in the RPM space, as well as more about what Impilo does. But feel free to check your email this coming Friday for the recording of this session, as well as the PDF file of our deck. And then stay tuned for our March session. So thank you so much for joining, and I hope everyone has a lovely Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Have a great one.